Well, hey, welcome to A Valid Answer with Scott and Marshall. How you guys all doing this week? Let me hear you shout out online. Yeah, join us on there. Valid Answer on Facebook, Valid Answer, or Kerncast on Facebook, kerncast.com. How you doing, Marshall? What's going on in your neck of the woods?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm just getting everything shared out. I'm looking forward to some rain in the forecast. It looks like you guys got rain and we didn't over here on the coast.
Yeah, a little bit. I think there's some more. I think it's supposed to rain heavily on Thanksgiving. This is the week before Thanksgiving. If you're watching this in the future, this is the week before Thanksgiving, and yeah, I'll share that right there. Post that, and so yeah, we're. When are you making it back to Bakersfield? You making it back to Bakersfield anytime?
I'll be back there in 2 weeks, which means the December 8th show, I may be in the office.
Cool.
We just had 30-40 minutes of pregame show, you and I, and I forgot to tell you all about that, but there you go.
How dare you forget?
Right? So, Cafe Med. Cafe Med is sort of, I think, the inspiration for today's show. Also, I think we talked a little bit about what the Thanksgiving consumerism shopping, all of that stuff.
Yeah, just kind of all coming into the whole Thanksgiving weekend and that whole kind of thing all together. Yeah, so hey, happy Thanksgiving coming up. Sorry,
happy Thanksgiving
I'm a little
to
tired.
you and to all of our viewers.
Whew, okay. I had to rub my eyes a little bit.
All right. Okay, let's give everybody some background on the whole Cafe Med thing, okay?
Maybe you can share a little bit on the article. I actually didn't read too much up on it. I never really was a Cafe Med person all that much. I think I ate dinner there one time. Somebody got me a gift certificate years ago. My wife and I, we went and ate there one time. I have a friend who plays music there almost every weekend. And then another friend who knew the owner and stuff like that, but I never really visited all that much. So, did you go there ever?
Yeah, several times. It was a fantastic little place that I enjoyed eating. Although now I kind of have a bad taste in my mouth after all of this.
Pun.
But let's talk about it, okay? Some of you, of course, if you're not from Bakersfield, you're not familiar with Cafe Med, but this will still resonate.
But I'm sure there's some local business near where you are that has closed before that you can relate to.
Right. So here's the deal, okay? Cafe Med announced, first of all, Cafe Med was sort of this Mediterranean food restaurant, kind of pricey, kind of high end. A couple probably isn't going to get out of there for under $100.
Always had live music in the weekends and stuff like that. It's one of those types of places. It's not your Olive Garden.
No, you dress up to go there for sure. You dress nice. It's one of those places you go maybe 2 or 3 times a year if you're middle class or above. It's got its usual crowd and all of that. And they got the bar. They got
a lot of local business owners and entrepreneurs eat there all the time. It's very similar like Luigi's and stuff like that. It's kind of a gathering place for local business people. Who's who in the town locally.
Anyway, the owner says, we are closing before Thanksgiving. This shock announcement came out last week. And in the interview he gave to the media, he said he cited as a reason was minimum wage. And minimum wage in California had been at like $7.25 an hour for about 10 years. And then it recently has gone up to about $12 an hour, incrementally over time.
That was last year or earlier this year? That was 2 years ago, right? 2018?
It's gone up incrementally over several years.
Yeah.
So it went to 9 something, I think, or 8 something, 9 something, 10 something, and so on. It didn't just jump all at once. It's gone up incrementally over time.
Those are still pretty big jumps.
Okay, but then when you look at the cost of living, which is, jumping even faster and higher, this is what we need in order for people to be able to sustain themselves. They got to pay rent. Going up.
Maybe they're sustaining themselves at a unreasonable rate. Maybe they're trying to sustain themselves at an unreasonable place. Have you considered that? Have you ever considered that?
I have. And when you recognize that most of our minimum wage workers qualify for public assistance, and when a minimum wage income is not sufficient to pay for an apartment anywhere in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere, then you're in a situation where probably the minimum wage needs to go up a lot faster because people cannot survive on it. They require assistance from taxpayers in order to survive, which of course is an unfair shift to you and I because now we're paying for their survival instead of the people who are employing them and making all this money off of their labor. So
All
I
this
don't
money. I
I
love how
think
you
that's
say that. All this money.
yeah, well, it's a lot, but they're
Apparently, it
addicted to
wasn't.
cheap labor, and they have found a way to foist their labor costs onto you and I, the taxpayers.
Ha-
So regardless of whether or
real
not we,
quick, have you ever been an employer? Do you know what it's like to be an employer and be responsible for people's jobs? Have you, Marshall, ever been somebody's boss and paid their check from your business?
no, but I
Okay.
think I can trust that macroeconomic data that's being put out year after year that it tells us that minimum wage is no longer enough to survive. And I do have a degree in history, and I do recall FDR saying that the minimum wage should provide the basics of a decent living.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the intention of the minimum wage. It was to be a living wage. And over time, the wages became uncoupled from living wages, and now minimum wage, if anything, is a tool that employers abuse to keep people poor. And this isn't the only issue that I have.
That's the purpose of employers. They want to keep people poor.
Yes, they do. They
No,
sure
no,
do.
no. That's
Yeah,
not.
they do.
No,
Absolutely.
that comes from a person who's never been an employer. How dare you accuse employers of that?
I don't
How
think
dare
have to.
you accuse
Yeah.
employers of that? That's
Yeah,
not
how
what they're.
dare I? How
That's
dare I?
not. That's not
Because
their purpose. That's not what they're trying to do.
Yeah,
That
they
is
are.
no. That is
As
really
an
unfair.
employer,
They're not trying to make people poorer. That is not what
what do
employers
you
are trying
call
to
it
do.
when as
That's
an
not what they
employer
are trying to do.
transfer
That's not what they are
your
trying to
payroll
do.
to the public?
That's not what they
What do
are
you call that?
trying to do. That's
What do you
not
call
what they
that?
are trying to do. You are being unfair to employers because you picture all employers as these pie in the sky, whatever corporations or whatever. You've never tried to run a business. You've never been a small business owner and tried to make it and try to care for your employees and give them as much as you can. You've never done that. So you just look at employers down there like, oh, those evil people. How dare you, Marshall? Seriously. You've never been in that position. You've
What do
never
you
had
see?
to do that.
All right, you let me know when I can when you're done.
Why don't you talk realistically instead of making assumptions about people you don't know and about their intentions? You claimed that employers intend to make people poor. That is not what is happening. That is not who's being hurt. That is the people who are being hurt, the employers who are being hurt. That is not their intention. And you are falsely accusing people based on what you assume their intentions are. People you don't know who've done things you've never even tried. That's very arrogant of you, Marshall. Seriously.
Well,
why don't you put on somebody else's shoes and have some perspective? Why don't you do that?
Okay.
Because you are being very rude to them.
What do you call it when let's throw some evidence out here, okay? Let's traffic in evidence instead. What do you call it when the owner of Cafe Med raises prices multiple times over the course of a decade, and then suddenly wages go up and says, I can't pay my workers anymore? Each time he raised prices, he should have been giving his employees raises.
Well,
But
you're
instead-
assuming there's no other costs except employees. You've never had to do that. You're saying there's no other costs except employees when they have to raise prices. It's not because of taxes. It's not because of other things.
I'm not
it's not
saying
about,
anything. I'm not saying anything.
No,
The
you're
employer is saying-
simply making accusations. That's what you're doing, without having ever been in that position. You're making the claim they raised prices, but they never gave it to the people. Therefore, they were cheating the people. You don't know that. You don't know why they were raising the prices. You don't know what the circumstances were. You don't know where that money went. You just sit there on your high horse and assume that they're just evil and want to steal people's money. It's insulting. It really is. You've never had to carry that responsibility yourself. You are insulting small business owners who struggle to pay. I see my boss struggle and live through it to find a way to pay the people as best as they can with the money that's coming in. I see that happen. Apparently, you've never seen that, I guess. You've never had to live it. You've never had to do it. And you don't believe that those people exist. So you just call all of them evil and just say they all want to take everybody else's money for no reason. That's unfair. That's unfair of you. Seriously. Do you recognize that? Can you see that?
No,
can you see can you see how arrogant can you see how arrogant your accusations are? Are there any business owners out there watching? Anybody who's sitting here who's had to run a business and pay employees and sit here and let Marshall say you only paid your employees to make them poor? That was your purpose.
What do you call it? What do you call it when big business in particular?
I'm not talking about big business.
Well, I am.
I'm not. We're talking about Cafe Med. No, we're talking about Cafe Med. We're not talking about big business. Don't mix the two. Okay. Right? Isn't that how you started the conversation? We're talking about Cafe Med.
There's some evidence on Cafe Med side, but I do want to make a distinction between the big employer and the small employer, because the small employer is being victimized by the big employers who are doing everything they can to shift labor costs onto the American tax-paying public. Maybe you like paying taxes. I prefer not to. Especially, if I'm not going to go eat at a business, why should my tax dollars be supporting a business that I never visit?
That's a discussion we can have. That's fine. We can have that discussion without you trying to claim that all employers are trying to make their employees poor. I'm going to call you out on that crap. I'm serious. I'm going to call you out on that. Even Josh is asking me, Scott, how many employees have you had? Were you in business at one point? I was in business. I was self-employed for myself, and I didn't have any employees. It was just me. I don't have to have been in that position to have sympathy and empathy for the people in that position. I see it.
Why not?
I've seen those. I've seen what people have to do to stay in business. I've seen them struggle and know that they go through that. So I respect that struggle. Apparently you don't, Marshall. You don't respect the struggle of business owners. Or do you? Do you respect the struggle of business owners?
Yeah, it is a struggle, and I do respect it, but I don't respect it when they continue to raise prices, when they have ample warning that minimum wage is going up, and they are continuing to shift their labor costs onto the tax-paying public. When you raise prices, but you don't give a piece of that pie to the worker who needs that wage increase in order to get by, and instead you let them go on the public dole so that I have to make up the difference, I have a big problem with that. Frankly, that's theft. That's theft. You're stealing from me. Stop stealing from me. Stop advocating, Scott, that these employers steal from me. I shouldn't have to pay their labor costs. If I go eat there and I have to pay an extra $5 a plate to cover an increase in minimum wage, then by gosh, yes, I'll pay that. But if I don't want to go to that business and I don't want to give it my money, why should I have to pay their labor costs for them? I shouldn't. I'm not making money off that business. And what's happening is...
Yes, Josh, of course I have sympathy and empathy for workers. I am one. I'm saying, are either of you able to have sympathy or empathy for someone that you are not? I don't know that you can, Marshall. You're not demonstrating that.
I don't have sympathy for a person whose greed is so great that they're going to pawn their labor costs onto the tax-paying public.
And so you're saying every employer is guilty of that?
If they are paying their employees below what they need to survive, yes, they're guilty of that. They're guilty.
Survive by what definition?
Well, at what point you need public assistance to avoid being homeless or to avoid starvation? That's survival. And that's what's happening. If you are a minimum wage employee in any state of the United States, chances are you qualify for either income or rental or some other type of government assistance. You qualify for food stamps, welfare, you name it. You're going to qualify. And that qualification then, I pay for that. I pay for that difference between your wages and what you need to survive, and I shouldn't have to pay that.
You're right. We shouldn't have to pay that. There's way too many services like that are keeping people down. We shouldn't have to pay for that. We shouldn't have to pay for that.
It's the employers who are doing that.
No, I don't
set wages. Employers set wages. I don't set wages.
No, the government sets wages apparently.
No, government doesn't set wages. Government sets a minimum below which, you know what the minimum wage means when it comes from your employer is I would pay you less, but the law won't let me pay you less. That's what minimum wage means. And so you have all these employers who would love to pay their employees even less, but they can't because the law gets in their way. And so they pay the minimum. But the minimum that they're being paid still isn't enough. Now, that should trouble people. It troubles me. Employers do have the option of paying their workers more than the minimum wage. Some do. But when you are in things like the restaurant industry or the retail industry or the fast food industry, jobs which, by the way, we all agree need to be done, we're just not willing to pay people enough to survive
because they're unskilled. They're unskilled jobs. They're unskilled jobs.
Care.
They don't. Do
we need the job done or not?
What's that?
Do we need the job done or not?
Not necessarily. No.
So you're okay with wiping out all of the fast food? You're okay with wiping out all of retail? You're okay with wiping out any job that's basically minimum wage, right?
I'm saying as a society. I'm saying as a society, maybe we have too much of that.
Okay, so you're okay.
Maybe we are over consuming as a society, and the overconsumption is what's creating the demand for these things.
I guarantee.
We don't have a realistic expectation of what things should cost.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
So that's why I'm saying I believe the American consumer is living beyond their means. And then at the same time, while living beyond their means, is saying I can no longer afford to live beyond my means. And it's like, well, then bring your means back.
Well, what do you call your means when you don't have enough food to feed your family for a month? Or when you can't make rent or you can't afford basic utilities? How do you live within those means? Do you go live in a shack? Do you go live in a tent? Is that what these people should do? Should we bring back shanty towns, which you once had in this country prior to things like the minimum wage?
These are good. This is what I would like to talk about. Yes, let's talk about that. I want to address something that Josh Gunderson said. I think you're strawmanning Marshall's argument with an all or nothing framework. I'm not trying to do that. I'm calling Marshall out on blaming. I'm on the language of blaming employers and assuming their intentions. I don't stand for crap like that. I don't stand for I'm going to make the assumption on somebody else's intentions and then I'm going to demonize them based on the intentions that I think they're living and falsely claim some intentions. Let's talk about the facts. Let's talk about these things, but don't start with, well, they just want to steal money and make people poor. That is not That is so insulting. That is so insulting to the
not make people have lives.
I know enough small business owners who are trying the best they can to keep their business and keep their employees to get to make as much money as possible. And for you to demean them in such a way to say that because you're a business owner, you must be evil and want to make people poor. That's insulting. That's insulting to my friends. You are making a claim. You are making a claim.
That about all small business owners.
Yes, you were. Yes, you were.
Cafe Med,
who you don't even know. Who you don't even know and don't even know the circumstances.
I only know what's reported in the newspaper, and those are his quotes out of the horse's mouth.
Right, but that didn't say...
So would you logically conclude when a person says, I would like to pay my employees less, but I'm not legally allowed to, therefore I have to go out of business?
Mm-hmm.
What do you infer from that? Do you infer that he wants his employees to be wealthy? Even middle class on $7.25 an hour? I don't infer that. Anyway, there must be a distinction made because, Scott, I am going to grant you some ground here. You are correct that it would be a hasty generalization to assume that all small businesses, all small employers want their employees to be poor. And you are correct that there are plenty of small employers out there with integrity who do everything they can to keep their employees paid and healthy and doing at least well enough to have a modicum of a decent living. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the majority of small business owners. The problem now is big business.
Okay.
Big business.
Now let's talk.
Government.
Now let's talk. That was my issue. That was my issue because that is not what you were saying earlier.
Okay, well,
that was my issue.
In all fairness, you didn't give me much opportunity to speak.
Well, in all fairness, you led with employers want to keep their people poor. That's what you led with, and
you unloaded one magazine and then put another in and kept firing.
That's right, because I'm going to challenge crap like that.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so go ahead. What do you got?
Nothing. Just keep on going. Now we can discuss. That's where my emotion was coming from. That's where that, as you say, the magazine being emptied on you is coming from, was the unfairness for which you were speaking, the cavalier way that you were speaking about people you've never met or didn't know, but you claim to know their intentions and vilified them.
I want to bring up, Faye here has mentioned that her boyfriend earns, I think, $13 an hour as an EMT, which is insane. Mm-hmm. He should be making a heck of a lot more. He's been there for 10 years, and this is Hall Ambulance.
Yeah.
Now, to be an EMT is skilled labor.
Highly skilled, yeah.
It's life-saving labor. And for that labor to be paid just $13 an hour is ludicrous. And when you get hauled somewhere on an ambulance, it's going to be at least $5,000 for that ride. Mm-hmm. I know because I had an ambulance ride.
Yeah, I did too recently.
That went not even one block. I was literally next door to Memorial Hospital, and they had to take me on an ambulance from one building to the next building, one parking lot over, and that generated a bill in excess of $2,000. Mm-hmm. And you're telling me with that payment, you cannot give the two people who drove me over there more than $13 an hour? That's ludicrous. That's insane.
So where do you think the money's going?
Well, it's going to the top, okay? And there's numerous articles about this, how about 85% of all the wealth being created on this planet is going into the hands of the top 1%. And that means 99% of us are not getting a share of that.
But let's go back. Hold on. Let's go back to Hall Ambulance. Let's go back to that right now. Where do you think that money's going?
I don't know. Bigger houses for the people at the top? I don't know where it's going.
Again, that's an exaggeration. That's an assumption based on that is assumption based on your opinion of someone's evilness. You think that's where it's going. Do you know?
Do you know? I know where it's not going.
Will that bill get paid?
Will
that bill get paid?
Yeah, the insurance paid it.
All of it? How much do you we just had this discussion last week that $2.8 million of bills were paid off with $40,000. So that means that $2.75 million that was claimed to be owed didn't get paid to those places. The ambulance company, the hospital, it didn't actually get paid.
Right. Bad debt is always settled for pennies.
Right, exactly.
1 cent on the dollar.
So, but you're making the assumption that Hall Ambulance is actually going to get that $2,000.
Yes, because it's not bad debt. What is defaulted. The insurance will pay it. Yeah.
Yet. How do you know? I'm saying how many times? How many times do they have to work and not get paid? How many times do they do an ambulance ride and then not get paid for it because that gets over there, then it goes into debt, then it gets sold over here, and eventually somebody pays pennies on the dollar and they don't get paid?
Yeah, how many times? But then they take it as a loss on their reports, so then they don't pay taxes.
Okay, but still, that's still not. But they're
still making a grip of money.
But
they're making a grip of money.
But you're making an accusation against the owners.
To the employees.
You're making an accusation against the owners that all of it, that everything that could have gone to pay the employees more, simply went into another house for the employer.
Well, it went somewhere because it didn't go to the employees.
Right, but maybe it never came in. Maybe it never came in. Maybe you have to have maybe these prices, especially in the medical industry, look so high because so very little of it actually ever gets paid. That you have to bill for this because so much of it goes into bad debt and never gets paid. You get pennies on the dollar for it. You don't know that $2,000 actually got paid to Hall.
Yeah, the money's coming in. Okay,
but then
that's how you have the wealth inequality that we have on this planet, where 85% of the wealth is in the hands of just 6 families. Okay, the money's coming in. Okay.
Yeah, but Hall Ambulance isn't one of those families. You're confounding things. Hall Ambulance is not one of those families. We're talking about a specific instance here. Where is that money going? Where is their multi-million-dollar?
You'd have to ask them, but I'm sure they've got the assets somewhere.
You're sure you're
money,
making that assumption.
They didn't burn the money in the fireplace.
Again, you don't know that they didn't get the money.
Lighting cigars with $100
especially
bills.
That particular one.
The money went somewhere.
So, okay. So now it's okay. So bigger businesses, where's the money going?
Well, again, it's on their books. They've got all kinds of cash and assets, but guess what? They can't somehow afford to pay their employees a living wage. They still need you and I to pay the difference to their employees. Here's something I want to bring up. Let's talk about Medicare for all. And it's quite relevant, okay? You would think that right now employers pay for health insurance for their employees, and that is a tremendous burden. I imagine
huge burden.
It's a huge burden, right?
Huge burden.
And if employers could be rid of that burden, wouldn't they take advantage of it? I mean, like as soon as they could, wouldn't they be, oh my gosh, what a relief. We no longer have to pay out tens of thousands of dollars for our employees to have basic medical care. Now they can go get it Medicare for all. Wouldn't they do that? Doesn't that make logical sense that especially small employers are going to say, you know what, go get your Medicare for all. It's even better than the plan we've got for you now. Go take advantage. And now we can put that money into raises or into expanding our business or doing something else. Does that not sound logical?
It does.
Okay. So why aren't big businesses quick to shift that expense onto the federal government? Why are so many big businesses fighting against Medicare for all? Well, the reason is if they control your health care, then you are not likely to want to go just find another job. You're going to put up with lower wages. You're going to put up with harsher working conditions because you don't want to run the risk of losing your health care coverage. And that's why they have it. It's control. And the control is worth more than what they pay out to pay the insurance. And in fact, they often share the cost of the insurance with the employee.
Do you know how much the insurance costs?
Like in what sense? Like,
percentage wise to the employee's payroll?
It's a chunk. It's at least in the solid single digits. I don't know. It varies per employer, per plan, per.
It's easily close to 50% to 100%.
Okay.
Equal.
Now, why do you think big business is not so quick to shift that back onto the government? Say, you know what? Yeah, let's do Medicare for all so we don't have to pay this expense. Why do you think big business is opposed to that?
I don't know that they are.
Well, they are, because obviously they are the ones in control of our federal government. They control Congress, and we don't have Medicare for all. So obviously, logically, they're on board. Here's the reason they're on board.
Obviously, the insurance companies have bigger lobbies.
It crushes small business. So not only do they have the control over the employees on one hand, but they can use it to crush their small business competition. And ultimately, that's the goal. Big business wants to crush all of the small business. And that's why they continue to fight against universal health care, because once you have universal health care, all the small businesses get breathing room again. Well, they don't want small businesses to have breathing room. They don't want competition.
Josh puts that right there. He says he blows $1,800 out of his bottom line every month just for his family, and will need to add that for everyone that he may employ.
That's right. That's right. Big business,
which is about 50% of a decent living wage.
Okay, well there you go.
So it's up to 50%. So you're saying that businesses are willing to spend 150% of employee costs to keep that control.
Big business, because once they lose that control, their employee payrolls skyrocket. Plus, competition from small business would increase.
Who cares if employee payrolls skyrocket?
Well, the net value,
they could afford to pay it if they weren't paying that.
No, they can't. The net benefit to the corporation is to maintain the status quo, because the overall liability of employees being able to go wherever they want to compete for jobs, and the overall liability of small businesses being able to compete more efficiently with the big business costs more than what it costs them to pay this expense in the status quo. So now it gets dirty.
So where's the money going?
I don't know.
Where do you claim the money is going?
I don't know where Facebook or Google or Apple or Walmart or any of these big, huge Fortune 500 companies are stashing their money. I imagine a certain amount of it is going overseas. Certainly the rich continue to get wealthier. They're buying up more and more resources.
Who are the rich? How are they getting wealthier?
Well, their net value is increasing.
Who are they?
Well, let's see here. Okay, I already posted an article on the world's 26 richest people own as much as the poorest 50%, according to Oxfam. That's an article
Yeah, but how much of that? How much of
from
that value?
2018.
How much of that value is simply based on stock or stock options that actually aren't worth anything until you actually sell it? That's not actually cash in hand. How much of that value is value because they own a certain stock, but it's not actually cash in hand? How much money do they actually have?
I don't know, but it's enough money that if the stock market crashed tomorrow, these people would still have more money, property, and power than you and I could ever imagine.
And that
The
and
world's
that and
richest
that
man,
and,
Jeff
and, and that
Bezos,
and that makes you very jealous, doesn't it?
the owner of Amazon, it makes me angry. The owner of
Because
Amazon
you don't have it, what they have.
No, it makes me angry because there's millions, billions of people who are suffering without enough, while some people have more than they could ever spend in probably 150 lifetimes. Jeff Bezos saw his fortune increase to 112 billion. Now I think it's in excess of 150. That's how outdated this article now is from a year ago.
Hey, I have a question for Josh. Josh, if you
Just
can.
1% of his fortune is equivalent to the whole health budget for Ethiopia, a country of 105 million people. Go ahead.
Sorry, Josh says a big business would pay that. I think talking about the healthcare would pay that and $50 to $60 an hour for my job and experience. Josh, are you saying that's how much someone in a big business, someone that does what you do, would get paid? I was curious about that.
Mm-hmm.
So just to clarify that, to find out what he means, 'cause I'm trying to figure that out. Because you've talked before about CEOs making too much money,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know that because as you said, you've never had to have a business to figure out how to grow a business, figure out how to invest into research and development so that you can go to the next step with your business, and how much money it costs to stay competitive and keep your business competitive with everybody else. That it doesn't all just go to another yacht, as you so eloquently like to say all the time. They're just buying another yacht with the money. So I did a little bit of research myself to find out the richest CEOs in America, up there making $145, $150 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that's where it's going.
Where's it going?
Is that where it's going? To pay CEOs $150 million a year?
Well, certainly CEO compensation has risen, I think, well over 300%, while employee wages have remained flat.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's, I think, since the 50s. Now, don't quote me because I'm pulling that off the top of my head, but there has been a massive jump in CEO and executive payrolls, as well as bonuses. In fact, I think Wall Street's getting more in bonuses than people get in payroll who work underneath them,
Mm-hmm.
So when the bonus, this isn't your compensation, this is your bonus,
Yep.
is bigger than the payroll, that tells me that there's some sort of imbalance in the system. And at the end of the day,
what would you do to balance it?
Well, you've got to redistribute that. You've got to take it off the top and send it back down to the bottom.
Do you even know what that would do?
Yeah, it would restore a vibrant economy. It would improve the living conditions of billions of human beings on this planet.
All right,
would improve
so let's
health,
let's do that.
education.
So let's run the numbers. Let's run the actual numbers. Let's take Disney, whose Iger makes $150 million a year.
Well, it's not just him; it's the corporation itself.
Right. Exactly. Well, no, we're talking about salaries now. We're talking about salaries, and bonuses, and all compensation. It ended up being, it was $300 and some odd million or something like that a year for all of the executives. I went through this and found the top, I think it's like the top 12 or 15 executives, all making over $100,000 a year, all of them. Total up all of their salaries. This is the information I found on a website. Total up all their salaries, came to whatever it was. It was, I want to say it was like 200 million, whatever it was. And then divided that by the 200,000 employees at Disney. Just the ones who are directly employed by Disney, not all the subsidiary companies that they pay, because those companies have their own CEOs, I'm sure, and stuff like that. But ultimately, if you didn't pay any of the executives, took all of the bonuses away, took all of their salaries away, and redistributed that down to every one of the 200,000 employees, they would all get a raise of about 38 cents an hour.
Well, that would help.
Really? You're saying that would help?
Yeah.
Your claim that would fix the economy is 38 cents an hour. That's redistribution. That's redistribution of wealth.
But again, you're creating this very limited example where you're just talking about what the CEO and some of the top executives get paid. But the company itself
is spending money to make the company better. How much money is Disney spending on research and development, developing things that ultimately bust? How many millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars do they spend trying to find the next best thing, and it doesn't work, and then they got to do the next one, and then finally they find that one thing that does work, and it makes the company better, and it pushes them forward, and more people keep their jobs and make more money and continue going on because the business grew. Have you ever considered what it costs to keep a business competitive and to research and develop and to make the business better so that it can continue into the future? Maybe not enough money was spent at Cafe Med to move forward to keep the business going. Maybe there wasn't enough money invested, and maybe it's because the owner didn't spend enough. Maybe he kept too much. I don't know. I don't know the circumstances. I'm not going to pretend to know, and I'm not going to pretend to assume. But not all of the money is going to another yacht. Not all the money is going to another house. The high cost of being competitive in business costs a lot of money. And not all of it is recouped.
Well, Scott, let me tell you, everybody listening to the show, you and myself included, we have a lot more in common with homeless people than we do with these billionaires, these executives, these CEOs.
So what? Why do you keep?
These people are not saints.
I don't claim them to be saints.
Business
and I'm not talking about them.
They don't care. All they care about is the bottom line. And sure, they gamble and take risks, and every now and then they score a hit. But when you look at, for example, the medical industry, which pulls in $50 billion a year in profits in the United States alone, that's $50 million a year.
Billion, I think you said billion.
Billion, yes. Damn. That isn't needed to improve health outcomes. That's $50 billion that's simply harvested from the 30 million Americans in this country.
Where is that $50 billion going?
It's going into Wall Street pockets. It's going into Wall Street pockets.
How do you know?
Oh, gee, Scott, come on, man.
No, I'm serious.
Read the news.
How much of that $50 billion is being reinvested into the company?
None. It's profits.
You don't know that.
It's profits, Scott. That's money that gets paid out to shareholders and to executives. It's profits. Profits are after reinvestments. So these are profits. This is $50 billion taken out from people. This is why half of the people who have a cancer diagnosis file for bankruptcy, because Wall Street wants its slice of $50 billion out of you and the ones you love.
And those people are not able to pay their bills.
People are not saints.
People are not able to pay their medical bills, and those medical bills never get paid. How much of that is happening?
Yeah, and then what they do is they simply write it off, and then they don't pay taxes. How do you think these corporations get away without having to pay taxes? We couldn't collect on this debt, but the size of that debt is a number that they pull out of a hat. Mm-hmm. And so they're cheating us on more than one front. The laws that they literally write the laws. They write the legislation. So the fox is guarding the hen house. Mm-hmm.
So it all comes back to the same thing. Every conversation all comes back to the same thing. Every conversation we have all comes back to the same thing, which is get the money out of government, put term limits on that's what it all comes down to. But none of that. Coming back down to it locally. I mean,
we should take.
Why do you vilify local business owners?
Well, they're not the villains. It's the big corporations that are the villains. But some of the local business owners, of course, are villains. And because they think they're big business owners, or they want to be big business owners, they identify with them. They don't recognize the fact that big business is out to crush them, and that their natural ally is the worker. And so
But someday that big business will be gone, and somebody else who was a little business at one point will replace them.
Not if the big businesses can prevent that from happening. It's
but it hasn't happened yet.
Way. No, it
Hasn't
hasn't
happened yet.
happened yet, but boy, are they working on it now, aren't they?
Right,
They
and they
sure
have
are
not,
working on
they
it.
have not been able to do it yet because look at right now, the biggest names in business right now didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. Didn't
Mm-hmm.
even exist as a business 10 or 15 years ago. There's still innovation happening. There's still little guys coming in with a better idea and putting big guys out of business.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it works.
Yeah. Well, look, we have.
I mean, even here in town,
our government is bought and paid for by wealthy people. Meanwhile, school lunch debt exists.
But even here in town, talking about locally and with restaurants, and you're right, you have Cafe Med closing, but you got Cafe Smitten opening a brand new building. Like they built a building in Seven Oaks. Didn't just like occupy a space that was there. They had a building built. Unless that building was already being built and they occupied the space, I don't know. It looks like it was being built for them. Coming soon, Cafe Smitten, and that's their second location. That's as far as I know, it's a local company.
Great. That's
so,
great.
but I'm just saying, like, what are they doing that Cafe Med wasn't?
I don't know. Maybe they're paying their workers. Maybe they're managing the business different. Maybe they have fewer ingredients. So they have smaller inventory, smaller overhead. Mm-hmm. There's any number of things that they're doing. But the bottom line is big.
So the reason Cafe Med closed isn't because that what the owner seems to be claiming, that it was just
minimum wage. It can't be. It's ridiculous to say it's minimum wage when you see
that.
But
who knows? In 10 years, how many Cafe Smittens will be across California?
I don't know. If they're a good place that takes care of the workers and they offer value to consumers, I hope there's a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. There's a Starbucks in every corner.
Right.
But it was 30 years ago or whatever it was where there was one Starbucks in Seattle.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's all cyclical. All this, the evil people, somebody's going to come in with a better idea.
Well, what I think the better idea is we need to cut people off above a certain dollar amount. No more tax breaks, no more sweetheart deals. You have to pay the entire cost of all your labor. It's going to be a progressive tax rate. And instead, all of the tax breaks, all of the subsidized labor
let's just start with a straight fixed tax rate that nobody gets out of. That would be a great way to start.
No, progressive, because power, as it grows logarithmically, it snowballs. And so you have to put the stop at that level. So before you hit that hockey stick of power where now you can buy elections, we have to stop that. And the way to stop that is through a progressive tax system. And what you do is you give the tax breaks, you give the labor subsidies to the small business, so the small business can compete, can grow, so Cafe Med can stay in business, even though it can only perhaps afford to pay its workers $7 or $12 an hour. Those workers aren't starving or going hungry. That's where the tax breaks should be going. Because
I love what you say, Josh. We won't know without seeing their books. Without seeing the books, we can't say. But apparently Marshall thinks that he does.
Again, all I know is what the guy said on the media. Okay, what he told the reporters. And he said to the reporters, he cited as his reason for closing was the increase in minimum wage. And I kind of get the feeling that that's bogus. And the fact that he wasn't able to honor the gift certificates, that he lied to the public when they were going to close, and then they closed this yesterday morning and turned away the public who they had already received the money. They had already, received the value, but they didn't give the service.
Yeah.
So, that was a little disingenuous.
Something needs to happen with that. I agree on that.
So, yeah, I think small businesses need the break and the hand up, not the big ones. But right now, the big ones are getting all the tax breaks. They're getting all of the incentives. They have all of the power. They're buying all the lobbyists. They're buying the Congress. And they're shifting their expenses onto the middle class and onto small businesses. Small businesses are being crushed under things like healthcare expenses and all of this.
And regulations.
Sure. And there should be regulations. They should be wise regulations, of course. But again, the big business can take advantage of all these deals. They can take advantage of economies of scale, which the small business cannot do. And that's why small business owners are feeling more and more and more squeezed. And if we continue on this path, the small businesses will be extinct and there will only be big businesses. And woe unto us when that day happens.
At the same time, I think you need to have a greater understanding of what it takes to run a business. I think that you don't appreciate, for the most part, what small business owners have to go through. and you typically throw them in with your disdain for the 5 families that own all the money, or the CEOs that make $150 million. And I think it's unfair to most small business owners that you see them in the same light as that. And I think that's very unfair.
Yeah. If you say something ridiculous like minimum wage increase has cost me to close down my business and just stiff all of my customers, then yeah, I'm probably going to throw you in the evil basket. Yeah.
But at the same time, there's also other bosses who are legitimately can't cut anywhere else. Have cut everything. They don't have that. They've put everything they can, and they simply cannot. And now this
the market changes. The market changes. There are no buggy whip manufacturers in the world.
I know that, and that's fine.
Yep.
But don't throw them into that same lot.
No, and they're not. If your business is a victim of a change in macroeconomic conditions or something like that, that's one thing. But if your business fails because you just don't like paying your workers, you want to pay your workers less than what it takes to survive, I think your business deserves to fail.
You know what? If you cannot keep your business running, because of bad business decisions, then yeah, I think
you deserve to fail.
Yeah.
And that's one good thing about capitalism.
Yay! We agree on something. Well, this has actually been a longer show than most other shows we've done.
We're at time on. We're at 5:44.
Yeah, I got 5:40. Gotcha. Yeah.
All right.
Well, this has been A Valid Answer with Scott and Marshall. Catch us on Sundays at 5 right here on A Valid Answer on Facebook. Kerncast on Facebook, kerncast.com. Sunday nights at 5. And until next time, I'm Scott.
And I'm Marshall.
Catch you guys later.
See you.